Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to a post that will be a bit different. It's more about how I'm feeling about all of this. It's called When I Stare into the Void, Will It Stare into Me? When I first started writing my novel back in 2017, I was doing it to make sense of a world where everything seemed upside down and inside out. I wanted to start a conversation with a world that seemed tangled and mute. After talking with my father on the phone before he died, everything felt very wrong and backwards. His Lewy body dementia was diagnosed right around the time he was about to retire from his career as a neuroradiologist, and this is the same disease that made Robin Williams decide to take his own life. Everything feels backwards because my father, up until the end, was still the same person I've always known when I spoke with him on the phone, but his body just stopped working, and he decided to stop eating. The nurses got him out of bed in the morning, and they brought him to his recliner in front of the TV. They gave him a big cup of water and a straw, and they tucked him into bed at night. And here I am on a different continent, and he was sitting there completely alone. He was divorced a long time ago, and I can't blame him for that. And not all spouses handle it well when their partner changes. And he sent his kids off to college. He wanted us to be ambitious, and the way he'd been taught to pursue success was through the academic system. He'd say, "Climb as high as you can, girls. I don't want to see you end up in pink-collar jobs like my mother." Now he had 2 daughters on the East Coast and 1 daughter in Europe, and another daughter lived just down the road from the nursing home. But she wasn't allowed to go in because of the coronavirus. So there he was with his TV, and he told me that he's happy with TV, and that while his long-term memory was still very good, his short-term memory had deteriorated. He would start to do something, and then he couldn't remember what the next step was because he couldn't remember what the last step was. And when we chatted, I didn't hear any change in his voice. He sounded just like he always did, and he thought just like he always did. He told me not to feel guilty for being so far away, and I know he said that just to spare me any heartache, because he wasn't the sort of person who ever put himself first. He really wasn't. He was always the provider and the worker, and it was very upsetting for me to hear that he was deciding not to eat. He's alone and deciding not to eat. And that led to his death. But he was very sick. And I know he would want people there, and I asked if I should call every day, and he said that would be nice. And he's never asked me for anything before, so I regretted that I even had to ask. I shouldn't have even asked. But the trouble was that he was completely right. There was no sense in feeling guilty because he was suffering from a disease over which no one had any control, and all we could do was just keep talking and keeping things as pleasant as possible, and that's what we did. I made all of these crazy YouTube videos in case he wanted to put a familiar face and voice on the TV, but he had a hard time operating YouTube, and I think the experience of seeing me as a talking head may have been unpleasantly surreal, but I'm glad I made them. I mean, it's kind of fun to make a little record of your thoughts. He was very brave, and he had a strong wall to protect himself from his emotions. But I was really afraid of that wall breaking down when no one was there, because none of this seemed fair. It didn't seem fair that this disease did this to him. There was just no justice in it. And I mean, he's taken full responsibility for all of his life choices, but I'm still angry that an uninformed choice isn't really a choice. I think he was tricked by the system in some way into doing things that were not good for him. Eating unhealthy food, overworking himself, sending his children far away to learn and work in distant lands. And from one vantage, he is one of the system's sacrificial lambs, of tragedy. And from another vantage, he sacrificed himself for what he loved, a system that took good care of him as he died. He died secure in the knowledge that all of that money he'd saved and all of his work wasn't going to waste. It was taking care of him. He was just, everything worked. He liked Zen Buddhist concepts, so I think he would appreciate how two contradictory things can be true at the same time. His death can be both a tragedy and a symbol of something, of a system that worked, of a symbol of his life's work. My sisters and I all deal with this independently. We don't speak to one another because we have very little in common other than memories of our parents' divorce. And I got a Facebook message from one sister that after she showed our father her new baby via FaceTime, she just broke down and couldn't stop crying. She is married and successful, but, she's alone too. We sort of hate one another because neither of us remember anymore. I spoke with another sister on the phone, and she was very professional in her assessment of our father's condition. She was a doctor, after all, but I may as well have been speaking with an automaton who had been trained not to feel. And I know that doctors all have to do that to a certain extent, but my family is quite tragic in many ways. We were all just sort of trained to, not worry about these sorts of, to focus on the job, focus on taking care of what we have to do in our own families, and not worry about the sort of disconnection that has taken over as we've all tried to get our own lives put together. It's work to set up your life. And it's the sort of work we did made our family completely disconnected and reliant on the system rather than on each other. Sometimes, to deal with that, you have to be able to control your feelings, and, like a doctor, you can turn your feelings on or off. We all can. I can look at the tragedy of the situation from a distance and try to figure out what went wrong so that I can leave warning signals to other families so that they don't make the same mistakes. It makes me feel like, our lives have some purpose. We've tried this, seen what happened. Everybody's on a different continent. Your father dies alone, but he's well cared for. That's the result of this particular system. We can change it if we want to. And sometimes I want to pretend that, none of this is really happening, or that it is happening in a far off world that has nothing to do with me. And what is frightening is that in many ways, everything that happens to my family is happening worlds away. I am completely disconnected. And I know that if I got as sick as he got, the same exact thing would happen to me. The system would take care of me, but I'd be alone. And perhaps it's just an illusion that we are connected to our families when we die, but it does feel, something feels a bit wrong about it. Sometimes when you ambitiously explore new worlds, you get stuck somewhere unexpected and lose the one that created you. My father told me that they took him to the salon and got him a haircut not too long before he died. And that made me happy to hear, but it really did make me cry, because it's just all of these strangers are taking care of him. When I started writing my first novel back in 2017, I was doing it to make sense of a world where everything seemed upside down and inside out. And I wanted to start a conversation with a world that seemed really tangled and mute. Today, back when I wrote this, someone out in the world answered back with a very nice, thoughtful review of my book. But that sort of echo from the online realm, the sort of symbol of my voice breaking through, all of the noise, it was quickly drowned out by conversations occurring in the real world and real world regrets about real world choices. So I've kind of used writing and trying to create a self on the internet to cover up what is really a tragic, disconnected family. I mean, I have my family here in Germany, my kids and everything, but those old connections that tie me to who I am, they've been stretched so thin for so long that it's really pretty sad. Maybe I'll cut this part out, but when my father died, I felt it. I knew it happened. I felt like I knew it happened before I was notified about it, and I felt better after I sang some old songs I remembered. And I'll sing one of those because it's the song I always sing whenever I think of death. And so I'll do that one. Mein Schwan, I don't know if I can do it. Mein Schwan, I'll do it in English. My swan, my treasure, with snowy white feathers, of his song sang me never a single measure. Shyly fearing the elves in the bushes, glided he listening there mid the rushes. And yet when death came and parting alarmed me. With sweet song he charmed me, and song with death came, and with its ringing his spirit passed on then. He died while singing. Was he only a swan then? A swan then. Singing helps. It really does.